Wow. All right, so we have most people here now, I think. I just wanted to say hello, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with artist Dorie Petrochko. Um, we'll be having about a 20 to 30-minute conversation, and then at the end, there will be time for some additional questions, if you wanted to put any in the webinar chat. But feel free to just hold on to those to the end because we might answer them in the meantime. And then I'll read them out loud at the end. For a little introduction, Dorie Petrochko is currently one of the founders, and an instructor of the certificate program for natural science illustration at the Yale Peabody Museum of Natural History in New Haven, Connecticut. She has a certification in botanical and natural science illustration from the New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx. She has a master's in art education from Southern Connecticut State University, a BFA from Wagner College, and a baccalaureate from the Walnut Hill School for the Arts. Last year, she was one of our artists in residence, where she spent the week at RTPI studying the fine art collection and archives and focusing on corvids, specifically crows and ravens. As a post-residency project, she created a series of artworks, which are currently on display at RTPI, based upon her research, observations, and interviews regarding the changes in bird behaviors in corvids. And so this conversation is going to be question and answer based. And so I'm going to start off with probably an easy one, but just Dorie, why did you choose corvids? Were they a type of bird that you were always interested in, or was this a recent interest?
Well, corvids are some of the coolest birds on the planet. And yes, I have been interested in them for a long time and have done a lot of research on corvids and have some friends who are corvid enthusiasts, namely Bernd Heinrich and my friend Steve Broker, who actually took me up to a place in Connecticut called West Rock, and we observed ravens in the wild. And that to me, that's what got me hooked is watching them and watching their behavior, watching them nesting as parents and how they treat their young and all that. And being able to observe them before drawing them is very important. So that's why what I love about the corvids, and will continue to watch them carefully.
Well, it's been interesting. So obviously, like we display a lot of different bird art here depicting different birds. But for whatever reason, crows and ravens, they've been very popular with people. They've really enjoyed them. And then, so maybe a follow-up question is about the title of your exhibition, which is Tricks of the Trade, A Corvid's World. Um, that's kind of an interesting title. Do you want to go into a little bit about why you chose that?
Yeah, corvids are highly intelligent. They're almost as intelligent as primates, and they have ways of figuring out problems, situations that they get into, and they're very playful and inquisitive. So they learn tricks and ways to deal with these situations. And my original intention was to portray many tricks of theirs, but I didn't, well, as you'll learn later, I didn't get to watch them as much as I wanted to in the wild,
Mhm.
watch that kind of behavior. But I did portray with the um, caching
Mhm.
sculpture one of their tricks, which is, hiding and stealing food
Mhm.
and preserving food for the future. That's one of their tricks. And one of the other tricks I showed in my work, Don't You Dare, was the mobbing trick that they use to either steal food from other raptors or torment them enough that they drop their food and just take off. And they work in pairs, which is sort of a playful endeavor on their part.
Mhm.
They just have fun tormenting other birds that have food that they want. So
Mhm.
those are the kinds of tricks that I would like to continue doing some paintings of that kind of stuff.
Mhm. That was funny. We had like a staff meeting yesterday, and actually, our CEO mentioned that in his backyard they have a lot of, I think it's crows, young crows, and then like a Cooper's hawk, and they were all just kind of bugging the hawk and bothering them,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just kind of for fun to like pass the time. There wasn't like any animosity behind it, but it's like a very interesting behavior that they engage in.
Well, it's partly learning behavior too.
Mhm.
By mobbing, they're learning about the behavior of the birds that they are mobbing
That's true. Yeah.
and how to interact with them.
Hmm.
Sounds very cool.
Yeah. Well, and so you've mentioned that you enjoy like watching different corvids and things. And when you initially kind of brought us your exhibition materials and told us what you had been doing, you said that you actually had a lot of trouble studying corvids in the wild where you live. And did this like really like kind of put a pause on the project for you? Were you very surprised, or was this kind of a possible like expectation that you had foreseen?
Long question, but
Yeah, yeah,
maybe a shorter answer.
yeah.
Yeah, finding ravens is a frustrating endeavor.
Hmm.
The very first thing that I did when I got back was I was thinking about where I'm going to find them, and I thought, well, maybe a zoo is a good place to start. And I did go to the Bridgeport Zoo, and they had one lone raven, and that was not such a great experience.
Hmm.
He was lonely, frustrated, and the behavior was, when you're in a cage, obviously, there's not much stimulation. And nowadays, for birds in zoos, they look for stimulation of, the whatever animal is in a cage, and there wasn't much stimulation. So ravens need that, and especially in captivity. But it was not a good start, obviously. And so I called up my birder friends, and one of them, Larry Fisher, I don't know if he's here today, but he's a big raptor guy, and he tipped me off about a carcass on a farm. And I went there, and it was cold, and the the carcass was very near a live wire fence, and I was a little bit hesitant to get too near there. And I did see ravens, and from afar, I did see vultures and even coyotes, but not enough to observe and sketch behavior. But I did get some photographs. So that being said, it was a continuing challenge, especially in the cold weather, to find ravens.
Hmm.
So,
And
but I
then,
didn't give up, which
right.
I'll tell you about later.
Right. And then you have also mentioned, and you've already mentioned him today, that you have a certain admiration for Bernd Heinrich, who is a professor emeritus in the biology department at the University of Vermont and is the author of a number of books about writing nature and biology, and also bird behavior. So when I first looked him up, the bird behavior didn't come up right away. But you've mentioned to me that he is an authority on ravens. And so was he a big help to you in this research project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been an inspiration. And his books, Mind of a Raven and Ravens in Winter, were what really got me started with ravens. Um, and I did go to his place in Maine. And we had some great conversations and stories about he did hand raise ravens to watch their behavior and, raise them from eggs that he actually, procured from a tree and, did the whole 9 yards with animal behavior. So he knows a lot, and he was an inspiration for me. And he did promise me and Steve Broker that there would be a carcass when we arrived so we could watch the ravens. However, his nephew, who is a deer hunter, had a deer a week before, caught a deer and, killed the deer. But he had to leave and took the deer with him. So we were just a week late. And so we didn't get to see any ravens. And this is what gets to be frustrating about birding and being able to watch birds in the wild. There's no guarantee that you're going to make an appointment with a raven. And so Bernd, yes, Bernd has been extremely helpful in answering any questions that I've had about raven and crow behavior. He's just an authority and an inspiration.
Well, and so is that like one of like the surefire ways to see like a raven in the wild? Like do raven specials? Okay, that's what I figured. Like that's a way to.
Well, if you're not out west, out west ravens are much more plentiful and are familiar with people. Like in national parks, we'll see them very frequently. I guess they go for camping scraps and things like that, and are very accustomed to the public. But yes, a carcass is a surefire way to attract ravens and vultures, and maybe coyotes too. It's just that we'll talk about it with the wolf and the raven egg, but yes, it is a way of attracting those kinds of scavengers. Sorry about that.
Well, and we can also, because we've talked about a couple different artworks that you have upstairs here, we could look at some like art-based questions now. So your exhibition is upstairs here at the mezzanine at RTPI, and where visitors can look at a wide variety of media that you've worked in. So there's wooden carvings, etchings, there's watercolor, there's even clay sculpture that incorporates real birch bark and living moss, like we've talked about a little bit. And so it's the first time I think that we've had like a kind of like living sculpture that we've had to like water and everything. And you've mentioned it very briefly that it's called Contemplating a Cache, which depicts a raven stowing a meal, which is a small mouse, into a hole in the circle in the birch bark. And so I wondered if you could just please go a little into like the story of that piece, or even like how you made it. You had mentioned to me that you had found the like curl of birch bark in the woods. Take this any way you like.
I know you're fascinated by it too. So yeah, I wanted to illustrate a raven caching its prey. And by the way, ravens don't necessarily just kill mice. They usually, they may, but they usually find dead animals, and sometimes they just, by caching them, they can store them for the future. And I don't think they have a problem with decaying animals. But I'm sure they prefer fresh. But anyway, the caching sort of protects. They use grass or bark, or a hole in a tree like I did. But the purpose, the impetus for this project was to show, how a raven would cache something. And they do use holes in trees, crevices, and bark and things like that to hide from other birds, because other birds, will watch. Even other ravens will watch a raven cache food, and they do fake caching too. Like they'll pretend to cache, but they'll pretend to hide it one place, and if the bird looks away, they'll put it somewhere else.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to illustrate that, so I found the birch bark. It looked like a wizened old man, and so I got a little anthropomorphic about that, because it had a big open mouth, and it had
Mhm.
sort of a gnarly nose, and it had one hole as an eye. And I confess I had to make another hole to make a whole face.
Uh-huh.
Yes, it was a little bit over the top, but I just thought, why not? It's a wooden a wizened old um, spirit man, bark spirit man. And so that was a little aside. But anyway, it was to illustrate how a raven would cache its food. And
Mhm.
I had thought of just doing a painting, but I got carried away with the birch bark and the clay, which I hadn't worked with much. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun doing it.
Well, and even besides, so there's the birch bark, there's the moss, but then there's leaves that you put on there, and there's even kind of different kinds of moss. Did you find those all in the same place, or did you kind of scavenge them from different areas?
Pretty much my own property.
Oh, nice.
I had to go up. Well, we have some woods in the back, so I had to go up where there was shade and rocks, and I had to peel it off the rocks, the moss,
Uh-huh.
and had fun finding sticks and leaves. And yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
that's one, so it's situated like basically right at the top of the stairs. It's like the first work that you see if you don't look at like the title wall or anything. And a lot of people have had fun like realizing that the mouse is there. Like I've been walking around and there have been people that have just been like, oh, look what it's doing. And I don't know, it's gotten a very nice reaction. And I know you had asked if people thought maybe it was a little spooky with like the whiz and bark and everything. But I think people kind of thought it looked not like enchanting, but definitely like very intriguing,
Hmm.
which has been fun to notice.
Well, that's
Mm.
good.
Yeah.
I got some feedback that it was a little weird looking.
Oh, like,
The features, and but that's, hey, it's near Halloween anyway, so.
yeah, it's got a good
Yeah.
vibe to it. I've noticed. Well, and
Oh.
so, besides the couple of like statues that are in here, a lot of your work is watercolor and pencil, which is actually something that Roger Tory Peterson used a lot. And so the question is watercolor your go-to medium? Because I know a lot of artists, especially like new artists and things, I don't know, watercolor has this reputation that it's like very difficult to work with. But some people like it and that they use it all the time and they don't find it hard to use at all. So is that like would you consider that like your main medium or just something you like to dabble in?
No, it's definitely not a dabbling.
Yeah.
It's a serious uh, thing that I find it beautiful medium for you know natural science illustration, just because of its capacity for fine detail.
Mhm.
And for birds, that is usually my go-to for birds. But as you know, I have two oil paintings in the show,
Mhm.
and it actually, the resource that I'm using kind of dictates the medium that I want to use. And so for the two oil paintings, they those photographs kind of dictated oil to me.
Mhm.
but other like the one with the bill feking
Mhm.
to illustrate that, and the iridescence. Watercolor is really beautiful for things like that, for
Mhm.
iridescence and portraying really delicate colors.
Mhm.
But it's not my absolute, preferred medium because I love mixed media.
Mhm.
I love using a combination of watercolor, gouache, colored pencil, and sometimes pan pastel. For the one with the raven and the crow flying,
Mhm.
I actually enhance the sky with pan pastel.
Oh, very
Yeah.
neat.
So that's like a powder. It's a powdered form of pastel.
Oh, okay. Oh. Well, and so you had mentioned briefly bill feeking. Just in case anyone watching doesn't know what that means, would you mind explaining that a little bit?
Yeah, it's not an exclusive behavior to ravens or crows because all birds do it. It's a way of their cleaning their bills,
Mhm.
getting any debris. Say they just had a meal or something and they have some food on their bill. It's a way of cleaning off their bill. It's also a way of I mean, it's like filing your nails of, make perhaps making the bill not so sharp
Mhm.
or even sharpening it. It could go either way, but it's an old term going back to medieval uh, falconry time. That's what
Mhm.
they call it, bill feeking.
Thank you. And this is a great segue just because you mentioned that you usually prefer to work in sort of a mixed media capacity. Um, and that's something that Roger did all the time, especially with gouache, watercolor, and different pencils. And so in your exhibition, we incorporated some different field guide plates that you had mentioned served as kind of like points of inspiration for you. Was there any reason for those works in particular? So we have the one there's the one portrait that's up front from World of Birds, and then there's two field guide plates that show a bunch of different corvids from I think across the US and then Europe, um, but a wide variety of corvids.
Yeah, well, when I first came, I was just blown away by being able to see all his field guide work. And that the very first image that I saw was the profile one
Oh, nice.
of the raven with his beak open.
Hmm.
And I go, oh, that is the epitome of ravenness. And I just, I want to do that. I want to mimic that if I can. Just that character, it just epitomizes raven character. So I wanted to make sure that I would have a portrait, which I did, but his beak wasn't open. But I wanted that regalness, show that regalness of ravens and attitude that they have sometimes.
Hmm.
So that was key. And the other part, I wanted to show the various species of ravens to show the lineage of corvids because I think there's just I wasn't really privy to how many species of corvids there are. And
Hmm.
I was surprised that the nutcracker was included because I had no idea the nutcracker was a corvid. And
Hmm.
other species that I didn't know about that are from England and Europe that
Hmm.
inspired me. So yeah.
Yeah. And then we mentioned this guy very briefly. So on the other side of the exhibition, from the moss and birch sculpture, there's a hand carved and etched oak egg that's about what, yay big. And so it displays the relationship between a wolf and a common raven, and it's titled Hunting Partners. And I didn't know if you wanted to talk. So this is a little different than everything else that's in the exhibition. And if you wanted to talk a little bit on the background of this piece and if is this like a very commonplace relationship between the two species, um, and just like why you chose to include this.
Yeah, this is a very favorite subject of mine. So ravens and coyotes as well, and wolves, not just ravens and wolves, but ravens and coyotes have a symbiotic relationship. And that is they kind of need each other to seek out prey.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the teamwork even quicker. You know, finding prey, obviously in cold weather too, is more difficult than in the summer. And I just read before this talk, I went over my notes and I found out that coyotes and wolves will tip off ravens to prey in the summer
Mm-hmm.
and warmer months, and ravens will tip off wolves on prey in the cooler months, which I didn't know, but they interact doing this interplay of finding prey. And the reason they do that is obviously the raven does not have fangs, does not have a way of opening up a carcass.
Mm-hmm.
And so they use the wolves in tandem to get that carcass opened so they can share in the spoils of, you know, their conquest there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to use that, you know, concept in this egg. And there's a story behind the egg, but I won't go too deep into it. But it's an egg from a very 100-year-old oak that was cut down in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And artists were asked to use any part of the tree in a piece of art. So my husband actually made the egg
Mm-hmm.
and I carved it. I wood burned it, actually. So that's the story.
Mm-hmm. And so how long did it take you to carve it?
Mm. I didn't time myself, but I would say mm, maybe 50 hours, 50 to 100 hours, because
That makes sense.
wood burning, it's not just similar to etching, say, or pen and ink.
Mm-hmm.
There are many different kinds of nibs that you have to use to get the fine detail.
Mm-hmm.
And for shading, you have to use sort of a sideways. You kind of drag the nib across to get the shading to come out
Mm-hmm.
brown. So you're burning the wood.
Right. Very nice. Very neat. And then there's another piece. So most of the work is on the walls, and then the two sculptures are on pedestals. And then also on a pedestal is a long horizontal sketchbook on loan from GNSI, which is the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators. And it's the New England branch.
Mhm.
Your display page is ink sketches of fish crows. And then on other pages, which sadly we obviously it's not open where you can flip through it. But there's watercolors of seashells and sketches of landscapes. And so I kind of was just curious about the life of this sketchbook. Like, is there a set person it's gonna go to next? Is there an end date for that project? Or is it just kind of a sketchbook that's being passed around and it'll be done when it's done? It was just very beautiful and interesting, and it looked like a very fun project.
It is a fun project, and it was just a seed of an idea of the members of the GNSI. This is GNSI New England.
Mhm.
There are many chapters of GNSI because it's an international organization. So this is the New England Guild. And we have a lot of different meetings. We meet different places. We come up with different projects. So this was a project that we came up with that really took off. And so every member has a different style. People do plein air, people like to do macro illustrations. And so you get a flavor of what each member likes to portray in the book. And yes, it is going to keep being passed on until it's filled up.
Nice, good.
And so mine was an observation of fish crows that were very tame near the shore, and they were just hanging out on a railing. And so that's a perfect example of being able to see birds in the wild that don't really take off. They're just kind of habituated to a certain place. The crows do tend to be sort of tame in parks and on the shoreline where they get plenty of food and they just hang out.
Very neat. Oh, and so we've talked about these very briefly. There's two works in the exhibition that are in circular frames. The very noble oil portraits of both a crow and a raven. These have been very popular with visitors throughout the exhibition, including at least two of our staff who have declared that they want them very badly. And so do you plan on ever, so these were a little different. So they almost mimic when you see like oil portraits of like royalty or like statesmen. Is this something you're thinking of turning into a series? Was this like a one and done thing? How do you feel about these? Because they've been very popular. They've gotten a lot of praise.
Okay, well, I did have fun with these. I don't call myself an oil painter, but I mentioned before Roger Tory Peterson's head portrait with the beak open. So that was kind of an inspiration. Is I want to do a close-up of a crow and a raven. And I, yes, I didn't have a raven posing for me. So yes, I did have to go online. And I will say, and this is very important for other artists, that the photographers that I communicated with, I always ask permission to use their work and give them credit for their photographs if I'm going to use them for my paintings. So I did do that. And the old world feel, like you said, the nobility thing, that was the circular canvas was something that I had wanted to toy with for a while, and having the circular frame that kind of gave it that ambiance of nobility. Yeah, I want to play with that, showing more ravens, showing their quirky characteristics, such as one of the things that I really want to show is, if you've never seen a raven walking in it, and when they're kind of strutting, they have sort of a hop, and they'll just hop and kind of be very sort of uppity and in your face, kind of cheeky. So I want to show that, and maybe in some kind of a portrait, and show other things like, I don't know, preening, like when the male and the female are mating or courting, I should say, they do some beak touching and preening and that kind of thing. I really want to show that. And I don't know if it'll be in oil or watercolor, but those kinds of things, more personal things, I'd like to show. in future paintings
Very nice.
using tools too.
Yeah. Well, and so that goes right into the next question is, are there like what is next for you art wise? So you've expressed interest in more corvids, but are there other birds that are waiting that you're thinking about exploring next, or something that's not even birds at all? What are you thinking?
Yeah, this is sort of a pun, but yes, I have avian subjects waiting in the wings.
Oh.
Um, yeah, I I have a whole file of my own photographs of birds, and they are just very inspirational. I am going to be working on, for birds in art. It's a
Hmm.
blackback gull in just on a pier with lots of rope and interesting textures, really nice light, like
Hmm.
backlighting. So, yeah, something dramatic like that. I have a lot of great blue heron studies that I'm working on. And I have one of a killdeer showing its behavior when it's upset, like trying to deter from its eggs. I don't know if you've ever seen that posture that they take.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but possible painting on that one.
right.
So, yeah, I've got a lot going on.
Yes, a lot waiting in the wings.
Maybe not enough time for the amount of paintings that I want to do.
That's very fair. Well, and so right now, are there other exhibits at other institutions where people might find your work on display?
Well, this summer I've had three different shows. Two of them were solo shows, one at our TPI and the other one at a performance center. And I had another one at the Plymouth Center for the Arts. It was a horseshoe crab, wasn't a bird.
Oh,
Actually, I shouldn't say that because it had to do with horseshoe crabs and red knots. So it was another syncopated relationship with an animal and a bird, or I should say, a uh, what is it? Horseshoe crab, a crustacean, I guess.
it's something very ancient. But isn't that because like the red knots use them as a food source during migration? Is that what
Yeah,
it is?
good.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
very
you did
nice.
your homework.
Well, we had actually very funnily, earlier this year, we had an artist who made very intricate quilts, and one of her quilts had a red knot and a horseshoe crab on it.
She was
Um,
in that show. I
yeah.
met her.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's why I knew that. Like, all right,
Yeah.
and that is the end of my questions. I see we have a question in the question and answer section. And then also if anyone wants to click on the webinar chat and put any questions there, we can do that. There's a question that says, how long will the exhibit be open? Which is until mid-November. And then the question is, will photos of the artwork posted on the RTPI website for those who can't make it in person? There are some photos on the website and then also on our various social media, which um, I can put in the chat. I also put in the webinar chat Dorie's website, her Facebook and Instagram. I'm sure you can see examples of her work on there. Um, I have a fun question. Do you have a favorite work in the exhibition by any chance? And that might be a hard question, I'm sorry. Like,
I have a softness for that Bill Feaking um, painting,
mhm.
just because it was something that I learned that I didn't know about the ravens and crows. And also, it was a real challenge to do the iridescence, and I thought that came out very successfully. So I was really pleased. I was also pleased with the portraits, the circular portraits, but I think the Bill Feaking painting was uh, you know, a good exercise for me.
Mhm.
And I liked it.
Nice. Sorry, I was just throwing our Instagram into the chat there. Chat shows it's disabled. Interesting. So someone said the chat, they can't see the chat for some reason, so you can feel free to just put your questions in the Q&A section.
I see the chat.
Okay, I do too. It might be the person who thinks it's disabled maybe didn't click ahead, is having trouble clicking on it, possibly. Um,
I see the chat, but I don't see their question.
okay, they were putting things in the Q&A
Okay.
box, I think. Yeah. All right, there we go. Fabulous. All right, and if no one has any other questions, we actually went a little longer than I thought we were going to. And so, Dorie, do you have any other fun things you would like to mention before I do the wrap up? You've mentioned a lot of things today, so if no, no worries.
Um, is Susanna Gradle here today?
No, I don't see that name in
Not
the
that I
list.
see.
Okay. I was going to wish her a happy birthday.
Oh,
But I'll just say, thank you, Rachel.
yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
and she'll be able to see the recording. So we'll end up putting this on our Vimeo and or YouTube. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and thank you, Dorie, for answering all our various questions. Like I said, I placed Dorie's socials in the chat, so you'll be able to find her on her website, Instagram, and Facebook. And then Dorie's exhibition, Tricks of the Trade, A Corvid's World, will be up here at our TPI until November 17th. And then we're open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4, Sunday, 1 to 5, and Monday and Tuesday by appointment. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks. If you wanted to say November 17th is the date that the show ends, correct?
Correct. Yes. That is when it is down, and then we'll be putting up plein air for the year.
Nice. Thanks so much.
Yes, of course. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.